Let's begin.
Welcome to Conversations with Melissa, part of Renify's Experts and Influencers series. Renify provides practical research-based advice, courses, and peer support, focusing on the underlying drivers of our ADHD behavior through courses like budgeting for the ADHD or home organizing for the ADHD lifestyle, and of course, the ADHD book club, to name just a few. We provide a holistic program that serves to help you thrive with ADHD, not in spite of it. We invite you to follow us on our YouTube channel, which I will put the link in the chat just now. Right. And we have another project called the ADHD Voices Project. We invite people to call and leave an anonymous message or a text. We're not collecting the contacts, and share your ADHD story. That phone number is 925-289-9033. And I will put it in the chat because that was a lot of digits. Probably seeing it would be helpful. There it is. So thank you so much, Renify, for making this conversation possible. And thank you to my guest, author Tim MacWilliam. This is the book that he's written. I'll be asking some questions based off the content from this book and some from our planning and previous conversations. There should be, I hope it is delicious and tasty because Tim is a very interesting and funny fellow.
I hope so.
Right. So, just to introduce you a little bit from your bio, Tim MacWilliam is a fellow of the Royal Society for Public Health and the founder of MacWilliam Associates, a training consultancy he established in 2003. He's completed 4 London marathons, numerous triathlons, and worked with BBC Radio. He lives in Norfolk, England, with his wife, Catherine, and he has 2 grown-up daughters. You weren't formally diagnosed until you were 58, and initially by your own daughter. I can't wait for you to talk about that. After you were diagnosed, you wanted to write this memoir to assist people undiagnosed or who suspect they have ADHD and their families. Your book, Sit Still, Timmy, recently won in the memoir and biography category the East Anglican Book Awards, which, congratulations, what an accomplishment.
I was really pleased.
Let's start with the diagnosis story, if that's okay with you, because yours is very unique. I've heard a lot of ADHD diagnosis stories, but yours is very unique. How did it come about?
Well, I was just feeling depressed. I wasn't sure what was going on with myself. And I did this soccer commentary in the UK. And I come back and it was a terrible match. Things hadn't gone well. I just sat down with my daughter, and my daughter is highly qualified in mental health. And she works for the National Health Service in the UK. And she just said, "Dad, do you ever think you might have ADHD?" I thought, well, what's that? I had no idea. And I started looking and Googling and reading all about it. It was like, wow, it's like fireworks went off. This has been the problem with me for all my life. I've only just found out, aged 58. I phoned my sister and spoke to her about it. And like most people at first, she was a bit skeptical because when you have ADHD, you mask, don't you? You try to get on with your life and you just kind of pretend you're okay. You're not squirming around in your feet the whole time or arriving 3 hours early for no reason, just to make sure you're not late. And my sister, she thought, wow, how did we all miss this? And after that, yeah, I got my diagnosis. Did lots and lots of self-diagnosis on the internet and ticked every box. And then I had an online assessment, a private assessment, and finally one from the National Health Service that we have in the UK. And then once you are diagnosed, you think, no, that can't be right. And you go into complete denial about it all and think, no, that's not me. I haven't got ADHD. And then you start going through about it and you think, okay, I have. So it is, especially late in life, it's quite a turmoil to go through. But at the same time, it's a relief. It's an answer to all those questions about why you've been made to feel so stupid throughout your own life. Maybe by yourself, you think, oh, I'm a bit not up to that. I'm a bit behind things. But I think there's that statistic, isn't there, Melissa, that I think by the age of, I don't know, is it 10, you've received something like 20,000 more negative comments than somebody without the condition. So, and it
I've heard that
all kind of
stat
made
too.
sense.
It's like 10,000 more negative.
Oh, yeah. And you just start to think about it from school when or you're moving around the whole time. You're told to sit still, which is sit still to me, which my parents all said to me the whole time. Be quiet, shut up, sit still. And that's your teachers at school. That's your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your peers, the whole time. So it's not surprising that one of the offshoots of ADHD is low self-esteem and low confidence. And because there's so much more than just ADHD. I've called them toxic outriders because there's things that stick like Velcro to your ADHD that almost cause more problems than the actual condition itself.
We jump into that denial part a little bit because I thought it was very interesting. You covered that in your book. That was an element in the earlier chapters. This idea of nope. I looked at all of it and I took the questionnaire and I answered, you said you checked all the boxes, which is, I mean, in there's the details like the inattentive type versus the maybe combined, and you really did check a lot of the boxes. So,
I did,
what was
yeah.
that like to be in that moment where you're like, maybe not?
Yeah. Well, the thing was, I think it was 9 out of 10 for the movements part of ADHD, the squirming around, and 10 out of no, 9 out of 10 for inattentive, and 10 out of 10 for the moving around. But the problem I found with the actual assessment were they're all yes and no answers. So if you want to, you could. There's ways to manipulate those tests. And so I think, well, maybe I did exaggerate that. Maybe I didn't do that as a child. But then you get all my sister wrote a little note, so did my brother, and that comes through about their experiences with me. So it's not just your say so in the end, that proves or otherwise that you have a ADHD. But the denial, I was thinking, well, no, that's not me. I've never done anything stupid, except for that one time when I almost bet the entire family wealth on a bet that I was sure that would win that didn't. But fortunately, my wife heard about this and she hid all our credit cards and our bank account and everything else. So I didn't go through with it. And there's numerous stories like that in the book that things that I've perhaps done that I shouldn't have done. And then you don't realize till afterwards that, yeah, that wasn't quite the same as perhaps other people, how they might behave.
I like that you pulled that one example out because you have a whole list of these. Oh, I've never done anything impulsive except for that thing, right? Or and also that they weren't just limited to maybe when you were in school, but there was this idea of all the money, right, for your home, right? Oh, I think it's a sure bet.
Yeah, we had this thing in the UK called Brexit, where we left the European Union. And I was sure that the UK wouldn't be that stupid to leave the European Union. But in the end, the people decided that all the wonderful promises of a great new world, better than we already had, was going to be better than what we already had, and so they decided that we would leave the UK. So my bet would have lost. sadly.
I
But
do
yeah,
remember watching the Brexit election and thinking they're not going to do that thing after all the work it was to make that united all of this. No, they're not going to do that, right? Yeah,
yeah, this country's still arguing about it now.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, 8 years later, we're still split in two by the whole thing. It's not a great environment to be in for this country right now, with the Remainers and the Leavers. But hopefully we'll get there one day.
So just taking a pause because that was a big set of thoughts, right? Hey, that couldn't possibly happen. Wait a second. Um, and you mentioned this coming out, right? Coming out and telling your sister. Um, Now, I have one sister, and my sister, no ADD in her, but dyslexia. So these things are sort of clustered. There's some genetics with them. Um, when you came out, did some people think, huh, what about me? How did that land in your universe?
Well, my sister, I think I'm very close to my sister, and I realize with her, in some ways, she's more of the type, the hyperactive type of ADHD, and I'm sure she's got lots of traits because she's very clever. She's done university degrees, yet she can't find her way out of a car park. She'll lose things. She'll go walking into the sea for a swim with all her clothes on without a towel. So in some ways, she's more that way than I am, but we kind of really get each other. So, and I said, "Oh, I think you've got ADHD as well." And she says, maybe, but she breezes through life. She's such a force of nature, but she doesn't have some of the things that cling to it, like maybe the intense daydreaming, low self-esteem, the OCD, depression, that kind of stuff that can all um stick to ADHD. Things like that can drag you down. And there's a chapter in the book that goes through some of my experiences with these. And I think one of them is kind of I think the low self-esteem, the low confidence. So if somebody says something to you that puts you down and people laugh at you, you have the initial thought how how upsetting that is. And then when you're told that you're too sensitive, you beat yourself up a second time because you're you couldn't cope with it. So you think, oh, I should be able to deal with that better. So even like a small remark someone might make can kind of ruin your day because you can't cope with what's being said. So that's one of the things that certainly sticks to my ADHD. And I think to many people it's different. Each person's ADHD um, can be different, and I think there's so many different symptoms, and I think some of them are being um, still found out about. I look back at some of my relatives. I had a great aunt Alice. She was Scottish, very Scottish, and I think she went around 1914 or maybe 1912, went off across the Atlantic. I think she could have gone on potentially on the Titanic. Fortunately, she didn't. She went off on a different liner, and she spent her life in America. And I thought she used to come back to our place back to the UK every couple of years on the big liners like the Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, and she was full of life. She was just like a fireball. And I thought back, did she have ADHD? Excuse me. But she actually worked for Thomas Edison, and he is thought to have ADHD. So that's quite a circle there. So if it weren't for Thomas Edison and his ADHD, we could all be sitting in the dark still, because he invented the electric light bulb, of course. And I think he had to have something like, I think 2000 goes at it, 2000 goes at inventing this electric light bulb. And because he had ADHD, potentially, he didn't give up. So he ended up with the light bulb. And I think also Alexander Graham Bell and I think lots of really successful people have ADHD. So many people see it as a plus, not as a condition whatsoever, but as an absolute plus you've got in life that others don't have. That ability to hyper focus, that ability to be the last person standing if you really needed to be, and to have those in some ways, that special skill to make you different to others, which is a plus, not a negative.
Just circling back around that low self-esteem, I've met many women diagnosed in their 40s and 50s, and that really resonates with that group of late in life diagnosed people. Stuff's not coming together, and it's depressing, of course, right? You'd go to mental health provider, that's the first thing they notice. Your self-esteem's down, you're low, you've got depression. So sometimes people will come in with that, and it takes years looking at just at that thing before anyone notices what's behind it, what's beneath it. But there's a lot to unpack around the ADHD and the messages that we have with it. And I also hear like there's a family culture in your family around it. Your sister's got this fireball element and things come together right for her, but also, what was that, walking into the water with your clothes on? Oh, how's
Yeah,
that
that's
going
what
to
she
work out
does.
for you?
Yeah, yeah. And if we're by the sea, by the ocean, she'll be walking in the wrong direction. I says, this way, no, this way, because she just, even though the sea's obviously over there, she'll go in opposite direction, or she'll walk around in circles, or she'll lose her keys. I mean, I've lost my keys, I think something like 4 times in the sea. I've just gone in there with my pocket, and
Oh,
we've had
oh my
in
goodness.
the ocean. Yeah, the ocean. Yes, yeah. I've walked in, and we had an occasion where my children, they were like, I think they're about 3 and 5, and we gone for a day out by the beach, and I couldn't find my car keys anywhere, and we started looking and looking for my car keys in the bins, in the sand, everywhere we could, retracing our steps, and I already knew where these keys were, and eventually, when I was told to go and look through some litter bins, I told Catherine, my wife, I said, I know where the keys are, which is the good news, but the bad news is that they're in the ocean. And she kind of had steam coming out from her ears, and we had to get a taxi home. I went into the ocean with the only pair of clean shorts I had, because I was ordered to go in there because my wife was so angry with me. And the taxi driver, he wouldn't let me in the car. So the only option was to put on a pair of my wife's bright pink lycra cycling shorts to get into the taxi. And then when we got home, we had no keys. I had to get a brick, smash into the brick door, into the front door, and the neighbors were watching. And I wanted to get out of these bright pink lycra shorts, but Catherine wouldn't allow me. So I had to go get the spare keys, go back to the beach, which is about 30 miles away, and then drive home again, which was I remember the day because it was a day of the soccer World Cup final in America. So 1994, wasn't it? So yeah, you'll know that because you're big into that sport, I know. So, but yeah, there's those things, and I guess it's like they call it an ADHD tax. I mean that was a big one. It cost me like 30 or 40 pounds. But I mean, every day I'll make a cup of tea, forget the tea bags there, or I go back and make one, or I've today I just I have a hot water dispenser to save me forgetting the kettle's boiling over, and I just switch it on, walk away. I've forgotten to put a cup there. So how many times, I mean, on a daily basis or weekly basis, how many tea bags, how many cups of coffee are just thrown down the sink. Somebody asked for a cup of, I don't know, fruit tea, and I bring them the wrong one. It's all this stuff, isn't it? Then it's things, the waste of time and the waste of money. Go to the shops, buy the wrong things. I'm sure this is familiar to the guys that are listening.
I like the buy the thing, know it's wrong, put it in the receipt like you've got the whole thing ready to return, never return it.
Yeah, absolutely. I never do. I just think, oh, God, I can't be bothered. Give it to a charity shop or sell it online or just put it in the bottom drawer. Or I think I come back with 3 pairs of trousers and they're all the wrong size. And I think, well, eventually I'll lose some weight again. I'll start running again, and they'll fit me. And I think just yesterday I went to the shops to buy some, but I think the main thing I had to get was cheese, grated cheese. I went there, bought chocolate, and I bought some washing stuff, and looked around the shop, and the one thing I thought was a cheese. Came back home again, had to go back out again. So all those things, they can happen to anyone. I don't know. People laugh at it, people think it's fun, but it can be draining too. And I think since I had the diagnosis, I thought that's okay now, because that's just what ADHD is. That's me. I can be more accepting of myself rather than think that I'm being stupid, or want of a better word. Because you think, oh, that's okay. It's just me.
Well, I mean, even how you're gently expressing it here, these things have a little bit of a personal toll, of a self-esteem toll. You would have a I'm going to quote you from your book. So this is it at the
Go
beginning
ahead.
of introduction. People with ADHD are not stupid. They may be more gifted than normal people. It just takes a while to work out what the gift might be, especially when diagnosed late in life. And this is the kind of sage wisdom I really love that your book has. Yes, it's got the detailed stories of the having to break back into your home. The What was that in American dollars? That cab ride was 80 bucks, not 40
Yeah,
bucks,
maybe.
not
Yeah,
40 pounds.
yeah.
I mean, that's a
That's
stiff penalty. Um,
yeah. That's 30 years ago as well. So that was a lot of money.
for
So
sure.
yeah, it absolutely was.
I was a latchkey
And
kid. And so I forgot my keys or something, and I just had to sit on the porch because we didn't lock the porch for hours. And I decided I'm not doing that again. So I know I looked a little strange, but I pinned my key to my clothes or my pocketbook when I started carrying a pocketbook. I know that looked remedial, but I didn't want to sit outside for 2 hours. That was how I
Mhm.
solved it. But you got to take it on the chin in some places because somebody might say something to you about your solution.
Well, I mean, I took my dog for a walk on the beach, and it was starting to rain. Came back, and there was a hole in my coat where the keys were, and we spent ages looking for the keys, couldn't find them. I had to wait for my daughter to get home from school to send to phone her to send a taxi up to the other part of the coast. This is years and years later with another set of keys, and the taxi driver wouldn't believe what he was being told, but he did it anyway. And by the time he arrived, it was absolutely pouring with rain. You could hardly see your hand in front of your face. I had my poor dog with me, kept on bringing me back to the car, saying, "Let's get in. This is the car." But when the guy arrived, he said, "Are you Tim MacWilliam?" So yeah, it was like the scene out of the end of Back to the Future 2, when the doc's there or the guy's there with Marty. And yeah, eventually he gave me the keys and I could get home. But I'm not sure if that was my fault at all, but they did give me a kind of a feeling of, I know I was cleaning up stuff off the beaches, just some trash and rubbish that was there. And I think people were giving me a bit of a wide berth because they thought that I was some kind of homeless guy looking for food. So they did give you no, I had nowhere to go or nowhere to get out of the rain. But it's interesting how people don't necessarily want to help you. They'll walk the other way. But I guess that's some people are like that. Some people aren't. But yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 different stories of me losing my keys. I think it was read out on national radio one time. by a guy because things got so hectic.
Hectic's a good word for it. Yeah.
Hmm.
You had a very close to the end of the introduction, you have this moment of, let's say, grief, right? For what could have been had you known sooner. Um, it's one of those things only other ADHDers know this moment. And it can be a big moment. It doesn't have to be a little moment. Like, what? I mean, what would have been like if I had had this intervention at school or before college or any other 2 or 3 beats back? This sadness about what could have been. Um,
I think that was just confidence not to go for it because what I always wanted to do was work on the radio. And I think back in the 70s, the guy at school, because I didn't have any kind of aptitude for going to college or passing exams and stuff, I was thrown out of English class. Um, Although when I won the award, I think if my teacher was still alive, I want to show them my award for winning for writing a book. But I think I just wasn't compatible with school, so I didn't. I just wanted to get through it. I didn't like school at all. I was just bored by it. Unless it was something interesting. I think there was a case where parents' night, and the history teacher said I was the most stupid student he'd ever had, and I was incapable of learning a simple fact. But my dad had brought with him a soccer book, and he said, "Well, how come he's learned everything in this book? He is capable of it." And so he kind of stuck up for me, and I thought that was good that he did that. That your parents can do that. But like the schools in England at that time were absolutely terrible. You just had to get through the day best you could.
hmm.
But yeah, it's a tricky time. I'm not sure. I mean, if I'd been diagnosed very young, I think, and I'd been put on drugs or something. And I think back in those days, there was such a stigma about it, especially with my family. They're quite, oh, how can I put it? Snobby, maybe a little bit. We wouldn't have gone down well with the relatives if they're one of the children was technically like a special needs kind of guy. So that wouldn't have gone down too well. So I was quite pleased not to be labeled with it then, but maybe it would give me the opportunity to have gone for something or been pushed in the right direction to have a better career path rather than going from pillar to post and getting sacked time after time. I got
Hmm.
sacked on purpose because I got sick of the job. I didn't want to work there anymore. But no, I'll just do something to get myself sacked, so fired. And in the end, I had to employ myself. Once I employed myself, I couldn't fire myself. So that was a good way forward.
There are so many entrepreneurial ADHDers because when you're working for yourself, that thing we did earlier around where's my energy, you can work when your energy's at its peak and not work when it's not at its peak. And if you have a working for someone else, they expect you to meet their timeline, remember to fill in their forms, all sorts of things that are not our strong suit for sure. One of the stories you told that I really liked said a lot about you to me was you were in school, uh, and I think under 10 years old, and another boy had something happen where he was upset and he he went away from the school, and you followed him like thinking that guy's upset, somebody should watch out for him, and that you appointed yourself and went, and sounded like spent some big empathy, looked out for him. When you came back, not well received because you left school without permission, and there was spanking, right? There was the great shoe, the slipper.
There was, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember this man, remember his name, remember the look at his face. I'm not even sure if he got, what his motive was for it. But yeah, I thought that I'd done the right thing rescuing this kid who'd run away from school. But I came back, I was just told you cannot leave school without permission. He brought me to the front of the class and he got this big, smelly tartan shoe slipper with a big hole in the toe and just hit me and hit me and hit me. It didn't stop. And I
Oh,
looked up and I could see all my classmates. Some were just enjoying the show, some were just look of horror. But I don't think I even told my parents because I think if I had, that it just said, "Oh, you probably deserved it," and that's the way that it went those days.
yeah.
So, but I mean, again, you think you're doing the right thing, but obviously he didn't think so. But I mean, today I don't know what would happen to that teacher, whether he get I don't know, he get in trouble with the law himself, because you don't go around hitting children like that.
Yeah, it thankfully looks like that's gone out of style mostly. Um, the other thing I liked about that story was there was another kid who got punished a lot who whispered to you on the way up and said,
Yeah.
"Don't say anything," right? No lip, don't give any back
Yeah.
talk. And it
Yeah.
was, you know, we don't always know who our allies are, but sometimes they show up
No.
at the right time.
That's the first time he's spoken to me, and he just said in his accent, "Don't say nothing." And I wanted to say to the teacher at the end of it, "Didn't hurt," but I kept my mouth shut and just went back and sat down again and just wondered what on earth had just happened because I wasn't quite sure.
I know. Sometimes,
But
you know, the thing from the cartoons where there's like Tweety birds or stars.
yeah,
Sometimes you wish you could initiate that so people knew you. I don't know what the heck's happening to me. I'm in another zone. Um, I liked how much empathy. I just felt like I like this guy. I've had my own little moments of I could see that other person needs somebody. It's not right for them to be by themselves. And I like that you could see what was right to do and you did it.
yeah. I think
Um,
that's a rule in life, isn't it? Just to follow your gut instincts, and sometimes we don't, and we wish we'd done something that we hadn't, and we need to follow that instinct sometimes and to be brave enough, because we're all probably brave enough and braver and stronger than we think we are, smarter than we think we are as well. We don't. We kind of hide ourselves away, and we don't always believe in ourselves, and we need to more.
I love this piece you mentioned about your dad sticking up for you around knowing everything in the soccer, in the football manual. And that you had mentioned sort of in one breath that the radio and the soccer, these things both were, uh, they had your number, right? You love them. If that was a job, right? If doing play-by-plays, you'd be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to have done that. And I think in some ways, if again, it's the confidence. You wonder, I did reports for non-league soccer sides, and I would do these reports on the radio, and I'd hear people that didn't know it was me who giving their feedback on what was said. And most of it was quite positive, but occasionally there's a negative one, and you think, well, should I just having the confidence just to go for it? I mean, in more recent times, maybe 10 years ago, there was a competition. My wife said you should go for this competition, but I never did, and I wish I had. And another time, I was at this big exhibition they have in the UK, the Ideal Exhibition. It's the Ideal Home Exhibition, it was called. And this is like when I first met my wife, and they had BBC on stage, and they wanted a volunteer to go on there. And I didn't go on, and I wish I had, because
Mm.
the guy that went on stage got a job with Radio London. And I thought at the time, I'm way better than they are. And I didn't take the chance. So you never know, quite know. And every time they play the Diana Ross song, Chain Reaction, which is what he played as part of his demo, I think of that and what might have been. It might have led to nothing. I don't know. But I did have some success later on in life. but you think you're going to be rubbish at something, and then you find out, oh no, I was okay. I'm actually okay at something. But the soccer play-by-play, I love doing that. Something I can concentrate on all the way through and describe it, and I get good comments back because I just spent quite a few years doing commentary to people who are blind and partially sighted, and just keeping them informed of the match that went by. But yeah, it would have been great to have done that as a proper career.
Well, we had a little bit in common because I worked at a place that did services for visually impaired and partially sighted and fully blind people. And I learned a lot about, yes, if you're with someone who isn't taking in the whole vista, that you need to fill them in. I used to I had a volunteer job of taking a visually impaired woman shopping, right? So we're in the grocery store. She can feel the fruit. Does it look ripe? I should say something, right? But I thought how educational that is. I'm going to point out something that's tangential, which is I'm looking in the chat, and I like to underline how I know I'm in the right place. So someone looked up your book who's in the audience, they found the link and they put where we could get the book, and they put a full link in the chat. So how do I know I'm in the right
Thank
place?
you.
People have my back. They're helping me. They're doing nice things like that. So
Thank you. I
just
appreciate that.
a little note. Thank you. Um, you have the book is not a little book, right? It's just this is a book, right? This is what it looks like.
Yeah,
You really cover a lot of different things. I wanted to, because there might be some people who are relatives of ADHDers or not diagnosed themselves. And we told your diagnosis story. Things that were interesting about it was a lot of times people will say they got ADD from their kids because their kid got diagnosed when they took them to school. They had to have an eval. They're sitting in the evaluation, and I do all those things too. In your case, you're fully grown daughter
yeah.
in the mental health profession came back and said it to you. So that was just novel, so novel. But then in that section, you've got these different therapies you tried and different therapists, and you had one piece of advice that was really excellent. And you seem like there's the English health system, yes, your tax dollars at work, but there's a wait, there's this waiting element. And so if you wanted to not wait, you could pay out of pocket for private. And so you put a pretty penny that way in order to get the diagnosis early. Um, then it looks like you tried both parts of this, private pay as well as the public services. Can you say anything about the therapies you tried and what you learned about therapists or choosing a therapist?
Well, I tried so many therapists so over a few years, and I found the ones that are better qualified aren't necessarily the ones that are better for you. It's the people that can listen to you, understand, and be on your wavelength are the better choices than the people that have got a whole alphabet of qualifications after their names. Because I found one guy, and he was just really arrogant, and he pretty much told me to shut up and listen to him, and if I listened to him, I would improve. And in the end, I almost just walked out, and I just thought I just was kind of counting down the moments till I could get out of his surgery. And sometimes it's on a Zoom meeting. I just want to slam the computer lid down because I've had enough. But eventually, I think you've got to be honest why you're having the therapy, why you're there, and what you want to get out of it. Because if you can't be honest with that person, if you're hiding things, then you can't be helped. And I guess it's part of their skill for them to listen to you and for you to be comfortable with them, so you can tell them pretty much anything. But I mean, on the diagnosis, yeah, I'd had to pay. It's the cost of a small holiday to get the private diagnosis because as I say, the National Health Service had a waiting list at the time, I think of 2 to 3 years But now, after COVID, it's something like 5 to 7 years. So people cannot get a diagnosis and the service is stretched. And there's a whole documentary on TV about some of these private clinics that are ripping you off and they're not for real and they're giving false diagnosis and they're causing all kinds of problems. And some people, they say ADHD is not real. You haven't got it. You're making it up. You're using it as an excuse. Um, it's not a real thing. And I don't even, I think back when I was at school, when I was young, I don't think it was a thing as such. But now I think more and more now people are growing to realize that it is something that's affected either countless people in different ways. But yeah, therapy is a difficult thing. I tried different people um, for different reasons, and there's always sort of like a family issue we've had, and when it comes to that, it's usually like an impasse. They can't get through, and at that point, we have to just say goodbye and pass it. So it's quite a personal thing, but yeah, these are some of these therapists. I think some of them are great, some of them perhaps are a bit overbearing, but none of them track you down. They're quite good with you. They just say, if you don't want to carry on with me, let's finish. And some of them they dump you because they think they can't help you, which is good. I think it's good and it's honest because and others you might have enough of you yourself and you move on.
And just looking at the chat, there are some other people who relate to that. So I see a story about someone going in feeling depressed and the psychologist saying you were smiling so you couldn't possibly, and it's like
Yeah,
I put such a positive spin on stuff.
yeah,
It's not going great. That's
yeah.
why I'm here.
I, I, I think I would go into a therapist, a new therapist. I'd say, I've got ADHD, and they'd roll their eyes and they'd say, who told you that? Dr. Google. I'd say, no, a Harley Street psychiatrist. They went, oh, don't worry. Then you're just like Chris Packham, who's a well-known TV person over here. And I said, no, he has autism. That's something completely different. And we're about a minute into the session, and I'm thinking, oh, I've got like another 40 minutes of this person. And
Yeah.
I just go through with total disdain to them. So again, you gotta like them, and I think you gotta like them. They got to be able to listen to you, and most of all, you've got to be honest with yourself because there's no point in keeping secrets from that person. Otherwise, they won't be able to help you. But I got something out of most therapists that I spoke to, even if it was even if it was something negative. I thought, well, I've learned something about them myself. I went to one person who was a particular ADHD therapist, and she was dueling with me as to who had the worst ADHD, and she was jumping up and down and waving to people, and in the end, I think she won the duel. But she wrote on a piece of flip chart paper how many days my life had been so far. And then dramatically, she ripped it off the stand and said, you can't do anything about that. Look to the future, not the past. And I thought, well, good advice, but it's easier said than done, isn't it? Not to grieve for that time lost, as you mentioned earlier.
Well, we have to come to terms. I mean, we're standing where we are on the road, but we want to make sense of what happened before. Um, this is the quote that I thought was terrifically helpful. Um, ADHD specialist, that's the end of the last sentence. It's rare to find someone that I'm entirely at ease with and who will laugh, understand, and then make an attempt to correct my behavior without being judgmental. And I think that just says it all, that we have to be, we're still choosing that person. They have to meet us part way, and how important it is to not feel judged and be able to say our truth. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I was having a difficult time. I did meet that person, and I got to the end of my tether with particular health service and what they were offering me. And she came along as a new person and really helped me. We got on well. And it turned out to be that she had ADHD as well. Because I don't know about the guys here. I always find that people with ADHD, I guess I'm better with because they've got a vibe about them. We kind of get each other. And I don't think I've met anyone with ADHD that I haven't got on with yet. I haven't been able to just feel comfortable with. I'm not being judged. I'm being, well, we know what we're doing here. We get on fine.
Isn't it
We can
interesting?
talk.
I mean, Rick had put something in the chat about this, maybe it was moral compass, big empathy. We have big empathy um, for others, and we can kind of have a sense, there's some connection thing. Maybe it's the uh, how we can hear ourselves in the other person, especially people who are divergent thinkers, and they notice all the other things around them too. Okay, yeah, where there's some connection there. You had this: try to accept yourself as you are and surround yourself with people who will do the same. This is why I thought sage advice. That's why I keep saying that about
Yeah.
you.
It's easier said than done though, because if you are surrounded, sometimes you cannot avoid being with that person. Those people that don't get you, don't value you, they judge you, and you might be forced for whatever reason to have them in your world, and that can be quite a drain to have. And it's not always the kind of person that you can expel from your life. Um, if they don't get you, if someone blames you for what you've done in the past, it can be difficult. And although I think ADHD is a reason for a lot of things, since the diagnosis, I don't like it when people say, "Oh, he's done that weird thing because he's got ADHD." It's not necessarily just about that. It's about your personality, how you are, and what you feel, not about just having to hang your hat on that label the whole time. And I find it slightly condescending of people just to say, "Oh, he's got ADHD, that's why." And in some ways, it's kind of clips my wings and stopped me from sometimes doing something a bit eccentric that I'd like to do. But because I think, oh, they'll say it's because I've got ADHD. So it's in some ways it can take away. Again, you're your own worst critic. So you just got to be your own, be yourself as best you can.
Hmm. There's some other people in the chat also diagnosed in their late 50s, really relating
Wow.
to things that you're saying. Um, I love this story about your Concerta because it was just so colorful. On my first day taking Concerta, I was running down the street like George Bailey in the Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life, greeting everyone with a big silly grin on my face. Hooray, I'm cured and my life's going to be brilliant from now on. And there's so many of us where the meds
Yeah,
come on and they're right. And it's like, ah, it's got a
yeah.
magic quality, and you're so excellent at saying how magical it is. Um, but I also see you saying, the pills aren't the only avenue. So are there certain skills that you look to build or interventions? People all have these strategies and things that they use. Do you have a couple of go-tos?
Well, I find just being active helps. If I can do some exercise, I can get those sort of endorphins going, the very uh, good positive vibes going through your body. I mean, excuse me, I Christmas, because of sort of can be quite an emotional time. I thought, well, I took a couple of methylphenidates on that day, and just to get me through it. And because my wife's not been so well, I'm doing all the cooking. So I'm cooking 3 different meals. I'm cooking turkey. I'm cooking, I think, burgers and chips. And I'm cooking some other vegetarian meal as well. And I'd taken the methylphenidate, and I was going through sludge everything was in slow motion. I thought, well, I'm not sure about this because it was just like, I'm sure if I had all my attributes with me, I'd be able to do all this cooking and stuff much better. And I forgot certain things. I forgot the stuffing. I forgot to put some gravy on. I forgot to put some, I don't know, some dessert on. I wouldn't normally forget that. And I thought, well, how much of this could be down to those drugs? And next day I went, so we spent Christmas by the ocean. You're getting a theme here. I love being by the sea. And the next day, even in December, there was this charity swim. So everybody goes on Boxing Day, day after Christmas, and we all go in the sea, and it's freezing cold. I don't know, it's probably about 5 degrees Celsius. And we go in there, and everyone, you have to go in and go under. Everyone screams and comes out again. But it's a great event. And I felt so good after that. I felt there's the cold water. I had no drugs. And I felt so, so good. And I thought, actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to take any more medication for a while and see how I get on. And that was 80 days ago. And I've gone through that time. And I'm not kind of condoning it because sometimes you kind of need it. But I'm just seeing how I get on for this streak of time without it. And there has been times when I thought I really should take it today. And I've had a bad time. I felt I just need it. I just gone with it and just I'm keeping a diary every day of how I feel, good and the bad. Because I found with the drugs that they never seem to work for me the same twice. And I probably don't take them as I should. I've tried I've tried everything on and off. I drive my different therapists mad. In the end, I went all the way around to the first one they prescribed, and I just go it's fairly low dose methylphenidate, Ritalin, and I just take it if I need it, and they let me take it as I want to. And I find at first it gives you a bit of a zip, you're feeling good, and then I just find it kind of just it sludges up my brain a little bit. I can't quite be myself. And if I need to be on my top form, I don't take it. If I want to be calmer, get through a bad spell, then I'll take it to keep me going. But I don't always take it. And that's probably because I was 58 before I got diagnosed. And I think, well, I've been 58 years without taking drugs. So why do I want to take them now? So that was kind of in my mind. It's a bad thought. But what I do like about ADHD drugs, and it's good for an ADHD brain, is they get to work straight away, don't they? Straight into your brain, zipping through you. I know I was misdiagnosed with depression, and they give you sertraline, for example, and they say, well, it'll take three months to work, and then it might not work anyway. I think, well, I'm not going to mess around with that because of those side effects and whatever. So I just said no. So I got like a drawer full of various drugs I've been given that I've given back now. But yeah, that's the one thing with having those various um, drugs you can take for ADHD. I don't know how the other guys find that, whether they take the drugs and if they find it beneficial, or if they don't take them, they really kind of drop off.
Well, I notice a couple of things, which one I think, is this an ADHD thing where it's like, I don't want to throw them out either, things I'm not taking, even things my mother
Yeah.
stopped taking because I look after her. And I don't know what to do with these things. They're in a drawer somewhere. So that really like, yeah, what am I doing with these things? They're around. And there's a percentage of people for whom the drugs never really meet them. Um, and I could understand your perspective about I went all this time and your running probably really helped manage certain things for you. You're being a runner and the marathons and I've noticed around the time the pandemic happened that a lot of people who were gym people or exercised that they noticed the ADHD and they never noticed it before. You're like
Yeah.
taking the exercise out of the equation, that can mess up something that was balanced just so.
I think so. And there's been a huge amount of extra people who've been diagnosed with ADHD since then. And I must admit, during that time, I was out and about running the whole time. And I felt better for it. And because we had the lockdown, actually, it was quite nice not to have the stress of work. So everyone was feeling perhaps a bit better in that respect. But yeah, I always found that, and I think because when I got injured doing so much running, I couldn't run, I didn't have a release. And that's when I went into a bit of a pit. And then my much loved dog, who was my companion, she died, and I got into a real kind of spiral. And I mean, the book, I mean, it's real light and shade. There's some pretty desperate stuff in there. There's one chapter which is called Self-Harm, Grief, and Suicide, Self-Harm, and Grief. And it just goes through those things that I had to deal with. Um, and quite graphically some of the really heavy issues that I went with. So I know some people who've read the book said it made them they laughed, they felt guilty for laughing, but also they're kind of shocked at some of the stuff that's in there. And I've kind of designed it to be warts and all. And I think in the introduction I've said, should I perhaps give myself a false name for this? Should I just be a pseudonym? Um, but if I did that, I couldn't go on programs like this unless I
Mhm.
wore like a fake mustache or something, or you can get those little filters, can't you? You look like a fish or something, or a badger or whatever. But yeah, so I think it had to be all or nothing for me.
All or nothing. We're going to come right back to that. I want to do just a little, I'm a little off on my timing, just a little thank you to Renify, and we'll come right back to this conversation. Um, we're going to pick up where you left off about uh, why it was so important to be extra honest in this book to really reveal all. And there was a couple pieces around sex, addiction, and ADHD. So just waving a little something tasty, and we'll come right back to that. So just to mention our presenter, Renify, where we teach about the underlying drivers of our behavior. That knowledge leads to better decisions, and better decisions lead to an improved quality of life. Visit renify.com and discover how you can experience financial wellness. Our next guest is going to be Tamara Rossier, coach and author of Your Brain's Not Broken, which we are doing in the current book club at Renify. If you were a Renify member, you'd have opportunities for co-working around exercise and meditation 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for a half an hour each of those. We have that book club. We've got co-working sessions throughout the week, open office hours with Rick Webster, as well as multiple 6-week courses concentrated on finances and living your best life. Okay, right back to where we were. So you were saying why it was important to you to be so honest, um, honest to a place where you're a little uncomfortable. And it sounds like you ran chapters past family and friends to see if you needed to change names for them. Um,
Yeah, I mean, most people, I think maybe one or two said don't. Um, that they, well, one hasn't even read it, but they just didn't want to be part of it in the first place, which is kind of fair enough. They got their own reasons. I think they thought I was going to make a whole joke out of the whole thing, when it obviously they didn't quite understand. But I think my sister, her partner, they read it. I've got a friend I've known for 30 years who I worked at a holiday camp with, um, uh, when we were just messing around together. And she works for Mind, who are a mental health charity. I got one of my nieces to read it. And I was thinking more and more people would just find out these intimate details about me. I gave a copy to my radio station manager, and he was kind of taken aback. He just thought I was this steady guy who did his show and did it quite. He said professionally. He didn't realize the turmoil that was going on underneath it all. But then he realized that I was quite inventive in what I did, and I also took lots of risks. I got to interview David Cameron, our Prime Minister, and he sent in his minions, his little group of gang of people that worked for him, for me to give him all the questions I was going to ask him before he came in, so he didn't look stupid when he came on air live. And I just forgot. I just forgot that that was a deal. I just asked him all kinds of questions, totally honestly, about his life, about his son that just passed away, about what he thought of the opposition and the government and the Queen. And to be honest, he actually opened up completely. But I looked over to his assistants and they'd gone purple and they were giving me the cutthroat across this. And I didn't notice. I just kind of carried on. And then the afternoon DJ, he said to me, "Wow, that was brave," later on. But I quite enjoy that, that kind of thing. But no, it's I think it was important just to. I've a friend of mine works in publishing, Ed Cousins Lake, and he's been a good mentor to me for the writing of the book. And he said to me, "You can't be too personal." And at first, I didn't know which one he meant, whether you can't be too personal, or you just can't be too personal. And I think what he meant is just warts and all, everything in there. Don't leave it out. But when I just done the first edition, even the first edition that went out published, my sister read it, and I'd written quite a graphic suicide notes to my brother, and she didn't tell me to take it out, but she kind of did. So I just kind of re-edited it and republished the first edition the day it went out on the Kindle, because she said, "Nah, let's just," and I just edited a few bits and pieces out, and I say to people when they see what's left in the book, they think, "What on earth did you take out?" Well, because it's just a couple of bits and pieces probably went a bit too far. I read it to my wife. We read the whole chapter, and quite often we were in absolute tears about stuff because there's a whole chapter about us nearly splitting up. We almost split up, and we thought about it, then we didn't, and then that's just because I was going through such a dark, dark time. So it talks about relationships, and there's also a chapter that's written by Catherine about her life with me and how she feels.
That was on my things to ask you. Um,
I'm skipping ahead. Sorry, Melissa.
that's okay. Everything's peachy. Um, you're not the first ADD memoir author who has said, I put a lot in there, are you asking me about that thing that I'm a little ashamed I admitted? Yeah. It's the thing that's interesting is we all have some memory issues, right? There's some memory issues, but when you really started thinking about it, you could remember a lot and a lot of feelings. And just, I, that's one of the things I'm left with is what's the positive out of all of these memories is this isn't like there's nothing back there. All these memories are still present for you. Um, so that was one of the things. So I'm going to, you mentioned your wife and that she has a chapter. And this is the other thing I really liked about your book and you is you could talk about your wife's feelings, but you didn't. You let your wife say her own feelings and how it was for
Yeah,
her. And I just power to you, guy. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah.
what was that like
She,
having her write that? And what was the more important elements or, um, was there things you guys had to chew on when she was writing it and sharing it with you?
no, unless I have a complete blank page on it, write what you like. And she goes, I think she said that a lot of the time it was like she had three children, not two, because the way that I behave. And when I went out with restaurants and we go from restaurant to restaurant, and she said she would almost cry because I would forget to pick up the kids at a certain time at school. I have to ask her time after time, or I would forget things, or I'd go to the shops and buy the wrong thing, or I would refuse to queue or line up. I'd refuse to line up at any time, and she'd have to almost like pin me down. Or when I had stupid ideas. I mean, sometimes I had ideas about business that worked really, really well that people would dare to get, like getting sponsored cars and things that she said, well, that won't work, but she went with it. But with certain things like putting a putting a bet, mortgaging the house on Brexit. She said no, we're not doing that. So she pinned me down. But she's done a good advice page on that as well about what to do with people, and she says, that she's been on the brink a couple of times. So, but I think that there's a nice quote in there. She says that that if you can stick with somebody with ADHD, you do get something that's a bit more rarefied, a bit special, a bit more intense. But there are some bumps in the road that you have to deal with from that. So I think, but a lot of people say that's the chapter that they read first, because I think the book is intended. You can skip around it if you like, if you've got ADHD. Because I hadn't read a book myself till I was about into my 50s, 58. And then because my wife became unwell, I started reading to her. So then I started reading. But no, I think that is one of the chapters that people enjoy. And again, she's got no holds barred. She can said what she wanted to say.
She does. She loves you. I mean, she wouldn't have stuck with you if she didn't.
Yeah,
And that comes across. And even the element that you just quoted about, if this isn't for you, get out early. She doesn't say it that way, but I feel like it's between the lines a little bit. There's early on, maybe it's even in the introduction, you kind of know us who's reading your book. Yeah, you can skip around in this book. I know you're going to skip around. Just that you know that about us. I think it's helpful that an author isn't thinking something they said earlier on, and it's
yeah.
the whole incomplete story here because this might be the only part you're reading. So I like when you're writing to me. You're writing to me, which reminds me a little bit about our preparation where you talked about being on the radio and how people are alone with the radio on, and so the radio people have a very personal relationship um, with their listeners. So I feel like you brought that to your book, very much so.
Well, yeah, oh yeah, I had all kinds of adventures with my radio. Um, One of the things is that you can trust your memory, but I always had all the names plastered all over the studio in case I forgot them, because that could easily happen. But I think one of my very earliest memories was I worked for hospital radio. So the radio station went around all the wards in the hospital, and I sat with this lady, and she just lost her baby. I sat with her we're getting requests to play, and I just sat with her and spoke with her for a while. She wanted me to play a tune for her. And I think I just realized then that with radio, it's just so intimate because you're talking to that one person, and it's a medium you just don't get with anything else. And it's a shame that over in the UK, radio is fading out quite badly. So the commercial stations are all grouping into one national station, and the BBC have taken away lots of the local radio, which people depended on. So if you wanted to work in radio now, it's very, very difficult to get into it. But yeah, I've had all kinds of adventures and faux pas, and I think I accidentally announced that Doris Day had died when she hadn't. So there's somebody, one of the DJs, he just sent me a text saying Doris Day has passed away. I don't know if he's messing with me, but we did a whole load of obits, played her tunes, and then no one else is reporting it. Then I looked on the national news and everywhere else. It turned out, I don't know if he was just trying to messing with me or what. That's just one of the things that I've got wrong in the past, and just introduce people the wrong way. And we have the National Trust, which looks after some monuments and gardens and special relics. And we also have the National Front, which is a right wing, extreme right wing political party. And I introduced the guy from the National Trust as being from the National Front, and he wasn't at all happy about it. But yeah, things like that, that they stick in your mind, don't they?
Oh,
When you and I also took the radio station off air one time as well, by
But we're very good at remembering every misstep we ever took.
yeah,
The
we do, yeah.
woman that you're talking about in the hospital where you spent some time with her, there could be hundreds of close moments or moments we absolutely got it right, and those sort of evaporate in our mind, and only these missteps remain. Maybe they get seared into our heart in some way.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about daydreaming. I know we hadn't really talked about it in our preparation, but I noticed that that was one of your charities on your website. And so I wanted to ask you more about daydreaming. Um, is this an ADHD strength for you? Is it a give with one
No,
hand, take away with the other?
I think I find it, to be candid, I think for my symptoms, I find it the biggest pain, the biggest difficulty I have. There's something called maladaptive daydreaming. So it's intense form of daydreaming, and you go into almost like a fantasy world where there are characters who are real. You're the same person, but you might be a different version of your person, the same person, maybe more successful, younger, different, and you almost go because your own life or your own symptoms might be so difficult, you immerse yourself in that world. And sometimes you find yourself maybe even saying something out loud. Catherine's caught me a couple of times just talking almost to myself. She laughs at me, and I think, oh, I've been caught out there. But it really does, it's a time stealer. And it's normally when life is very, very difficult, it's somewhere else to go. And I said to a therapist, now I hate this daydreaming. I need to get rid of it. And he said, well, when life gets bad, you need somewhere else to go, somewhere safe. And if that's in your mind, that's okay. But I think there's a quote in that chapter that says it's a place that I love and loathe in equal measure.
Mm.
And there's different ways to kick it. And I think one of them is absolutely being active. Because I think I say that if you weeds won't grow in a garden where there's lots of flowers. So if you can plant lots of flowers and do things positive in your life and kick some of the addiction and other stuff that's going on, then you can kick that daydreaming. I think sometimes it's easy because if you're getting beaten up in life, it's somewhere else to go, and that's what the daydreaming is. So it's not a positive. I think sometimes you see yourself as, if you feel yourself as a failure, you might imagine yourself as being someone really successful, or the person that you 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 wanted to be, person you wanted to be and believed you could be. But I read a quote that you should stop dreaming about the person you want to be and try and become that person. But it's quite a it's a difficult thing. But and I think that in the next 10 years, because I've spoken to different therapists about this, and they say, "Oh, you're in your own tiny little world." And it's like, "Oh, yeah, you're gone. I'm not going to speak to you again after
Mm.
this session." So they don't understand because they tried to explain what it's like. But I do think that as soon as some celebrity comes out with it and it's in one of the big magazines, everybody will be talking about it, and it'll become a big issue of the next 10 years.
Well, I want you to know I see at least two or three people in the room really relate to this daydreaming in this alternate safe universe uh, that you have for yourself. Um, I didn't get to that part in your book, but when I noticed it, I used to ride my bicycle for transportation when I lived in Boston. And nearly every time I was on the bike, I would imagine every way I could die on my way from where I was to where I was going.
Wow.
Getting run over by a truck, the bike losing control in the snow, which I would ride in the snow or on a oil slick. And so I was so exhausted when I'd get a place, even if I was only on the bike for 15 minutes or half an hour. I just had all these
Yeah.
cartoon deaths before I got here. Um, but then being not on the bicycle, that whole thing, that whole set of imaginary places, put it away. But maybe it made me less risky on the bicycle. I don't know. But knock wood, haven't hurt myself on the bike in a long time. Um,
Mm. That's
There,
interesting. I think anxiety is a big part of ADHD as well. I think people have that, and you worry about things, and even if it's maybe hasn't even happened. I've done a chapter on anxiety and how it's made me feel, and like the phobias of snakes that I've had, and seeing a snake on a campsite and panicking and going back and checking out the tent, and there's these little fish, weaver fish, live in the sand and around the beaches. I've never trodden on one, but now I know they're there. I'm kind of pretty anxious that I'm going to stand on one. I think I took my kids to the beach. What if they had trodden on one? So I'm actually worrying about something that didn't happen. I'm still stressed about it. So yeah, it can go round in circles.
that's a funny thing because I we have a saying around my house is it might never happen, right? Because we could get all stirred up about something, and the alternate that that might not happen, right? That maybe might never happen. Yeah. We do have this nice thing in the chat about what about writing about this imaginary world, making a
Yeah,
place where it could be fiction, it could be something else.
yeah. I think that's the next stage to do something like this. I don't think anyone's really done a fictional story with a lead character with ADHD, and maybe that's something to be done. But I think it's weird. That's a really personal. That daydreaming world is a really personal one.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
but
sure.
it it is something that I haven't kicked it completely, but it's way more under control than there once was.
Mhm.
That's for sure. And you can think. I think one therapist said about kicking it away, thinking of it as a negative thought. So I think he called it an NAT, some kind of negative thought, just to kick it away and think of something else, or go and do 10 press ups, or go out and do something. And that was the way forward for it. But yeah, maybe writing about it. That's a good idea. Thank you for that.
I didn't, this is from the chat.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
but there was one other thing. I know we're really, I should be wrapping up right now. And I really like this habit of yours where you had a couple of songs, because I have my own little habit of a couple of songs that help me move past things. That song about rip it up and start again, that quote where that comes to you all the time. And the other quote was, if you get it wrong, you get it right next time. And I love
Yeah.
that you had these, they're so accessible. A lot like your thing that you mentioned about being in the studio and having the name all over the place in case it goes out of your
Mm.
mind. Oops, now I have, what's that person's name? Been there. But I love that you had that rip it up and start again. That just is so helpful. Sometimes wherever we're at, just start over. Like, let's just, this isn't the right, this ain't gonna work this way. Yeah.
Well, a teacher said it to me at school. Tim, rip it up and start again, because my work was so bad. And so I kind of just sing that to myself sometimes. And it's just that what's the story of my life? And if I get things wrong at work, or even around the house, or I start painting the room or decorating it, get it wrong, start again. So yes, that's the way forward on that. And if you get it wrong, you get it right next time. Well, because I don't know about ADHD. We all know whatever happens, we're going to get it wrong to begin with. I was on a quiz show on TV on BBC called Pointless, and you get two goes at it. And I was on with my daughter, and we made such a mess of the first show. We almost walked out. We tried to break out of the studios afterwards, but if we had, we'd have messed up the whole continuity of the entire series. So in the end, we just knuckled down, and we went to the. We just we stay with it, stay with it. We did the second episode, and we won. We won the whole thing. So yeah, so that we were pleased with that. So that always comes back to me. If you get it wrong, you get it right next time, and we did then.
I would have loved to go on a quiz show with my dad. He's a slow talker, but he knows a lot of things. So what a fantastic, I don't know too many dads who do that with their kids. So
Yeah, we
that's
had a great
pretty
time.
special. Yeah.
Yeah,
There was
that was good. We've got little glass trophies somewhere. You have to think of the most obscure answer so to win. So if it's pointless, so it would be like if you could name an American president, and then if you said, say, JFK or even Donald Trump or one of the most recent guys or Obama, that would be a high scorer. If you said one of the guys, from early on, or those who didn't last very long, or Gerald Ford maybe, that would be lower. So the lower the better. You would you would win. Wow, I picked out all those presidents' names out of nowhere.
you did. I was like, what about Polk? Right.
Yeah, that'd be pointless. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of Adamses, right? Um, just love that. And then there was one other thing from your wife's part of the book, that one sliver chapter where there was, I think you had taken one of the daughters out for a day and she didn't think it was the right thing. And then in hindsight, your daughter, it's a touchstone she comes back to. And that really, I had one moment where I was like near Christmas holidays and I don't remember exactly what happened, but somehow my dad came. We spent the whole day together. I still recall it. It was just a lovely day. It probably was right in the middle of my parents' divorce, which is why it was
Mm.
a great moment. And your wife noticing in the moment she had her own thoughts about what was the right thing, but as time passes, you can see that was it. It was clearly important. So that's part of why when we're standing in the middle of our lives or wherever we are, that we look back, we have some thoughts about backwards, we have some thoughts about forwards. And that's part of what I love about your book, is you've got a lot of this way, but you have a lot of, all right, I did this hard work myself, so I can tell you, hey, pick a therapist you can really be honest with. you know,
Eh,
try, you're not telling us to try all the medications, but I love when people sometimes will go, oh, this is good enough, right? Like I don't ever have ice in my water, but some people like ice. You want to try a couple of ways to see which ways the way that works for us right now. And I like how you try on so many things.
It's strange because I didn't think I had anything wrong with me mental health wise at all. I just thought, damn, I maybe had a bit of a bad mood sometimes, or I'd swing from one thing to another. And people that came into my world who had mental health problems, I was kind of, oh, I was a bit kind of worried about them and what they might do. And then as I've explored my own life more and more detailed, I thought, wow, there was so much there that was so obvious, but it was so taboo. And I was so deep in these issues that it's crazy, for want of a better word, that I didn't realize that I had the issues that I have that have put me right to the brink of, there's been standing on a beach getting myself ready to swim out to sea because I couldn't stand to live anymore,
Hmm.
or do self-harming because the pain of the self-harm would take away the mental pain that I was feeling. And yeah, just pouring and boiling water over my hands just to see how it would feel, using a blade down the side of my arms just to take away the other pain. So yeah, so there's some deep stuff in there, and then I'm
Mhm.
thinking, I've got no mental health problems. Yeah, clearly there's some problems there. Or when my dog died, I thought I saw her. I just kidded myself the dog was still alive. I saw a dog like my dog being taken for a walk by an old lady. I almost went and stole her dog because I thought she had my dog. Well, I convinced myself I did. So yeah, all those things, pretty deep stuff that's in there.
Like we get to this end and it's like there's still another, we could keep talking. We could keep talking. I know I don't even think we got into the ADHD sex and addiction part that we were
No,
towing
part
around,
two we need.
but
Yeah,
perhaps you'll come back and we can talk about that some
yeah, sure.
more. Hmm.
I mean that is the chapter that I thought about leaving out, and I kind of still think I should have left that out. But at the same time, I thought again, all or nothing. And I think a lot of people who read that chapter will look at that and see themselves in that more and more, because it's a growing problem, and people, even if they don't admit it publicly, admit it to themselves. That's a chapter that a lot of people go to first.
It's significant. You've done a good deed in including it for sure. We've had an interview with Dr. Todd Love talking about that intersection of ADHD and addiction and sex addiction and problematic internet use, which just feels very euphemistic for porn usage or other ways that people problematic, right? It's not talked about a lot. It's not. And when people are suffering and they can't see anyone reflecting it back, I think it's suffering alone is worse. So thank you for opening the door for other people to know they're not alone.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. All right. Well, I want you back. I want you back to come some more because we're
I'd love to come back. I've really
only
enjoyed
skimming the
talking to
surface.
you. It's been great. It's been good to be in good company, and just I hadn't got involved in all the chat, but I've seen the messages flying across because I wanted to concentrate on the talk. But I've seen some good messages going through, and yeah, thank you for being involved. And it's good to see so many people coming online and talking to you. And thank you, Melissa, for doing this, because it's a really good job that you do.